Hi, it's John from Crafts by John UK. Today's card is this Christmas card with a cute snowman against some script, against some musical notes, with a kind of jaded, faded, kind of completely not stamped perfectly, scrappy kind of look. And then I've backed it off with this stencil, which is just squares. But what I've done is I've kind of faded out the ink in the squares from the center, getting darker to the edge, and left a purposeful line top and bottom. And then to finish off the card, I've actually colored the snowman using Arteza watercolor pens. You can see there, it's just got a little bit of sort of grayish blue around the edge. Obviously I've colored the carrot nose and the pink scarf. And then I've got a simple sentiment which says the best Christmas is a white one, which I've backed in a kind of a mid metallic blue, a little bit of washi tape across, darkened the edges of the actual main panel with a bit of the same blue ink so that it ties the whole thing together. You can see it's quite a nice looking Christmas card, and I've just finished it off here with 3 tiny little gems. You can see there's a little blue one there, blue one there, blue one there. I just thought it was just a little extra touch, but it's quite a modern, clean layout with different techniques obviously on show. But I just thought quite an interesting Christmas card. So if you're interested in how I made it, I have a making of video that follows, so stay tuned. I've sped this video up, otherwise it's a bit long-winded, but basically I've got myself my panel of watercolour cardstock. There's the stamp you can see in the set, it's quite cute, and that's the geometric stencil that I've then used around the edge, where I've done the blue fading inking basically just to kind of highlight that central feature. I'm using distress inks. You can see I've got my kind of mid, I think it's broken china, and basically I'm going to start by stamping the central image. So I'm actually using just an acrylic block for this because I don't want to get a perfect stamp. This stamp is kind of a little bit bumbly anyway, but I don't want to get a perfect impression, so I'm not bothering to use a stamping platform in that respect. I kind of want it to have a jaded effect where it's slightly imperfect on the edges. So I'm going to stamp it down just freehand basically. The only thing I'm trying to line up is the script and the musical notes, but I'm not going to give it loads and loads of pressure all over just to make sure it's perfect, because I want it a little bit imperfect. There we go, so I'm pressing it down, and there you can see there's a little bit there on the right hand side that's kind of a little bit jagged and a little bit imperfect. I'm using my Wow extra fine clear emboss. Because I'm going to be colouring the image, it's always easier if it's embossed, and it gives you a nice edge to colour up to. So just using my heat tool there, just going to heat that off basically, which will darken the ink, set it, and also just give it a gloss, slightly raised effect, which does make colouring slightly easier. Just working my way through, and these steps take a while, which is why I've sped the video up double speed. It just makes things a little bit quicker and kind of doesn't drag on for too long. There we go. So there's our main focal point stamped. Just going to give that a clean. I tend to do my cleaning as I go along. I don't put it on the side because then you have a big job to do at the end. It doesn't take that long, which is good. Okay, so there's our main image. And you can see where I've placed that on the card. I know I'm going to put my sentiment down the bottom, so I've offset it sort of slightly on the left. I'm using my Arteza watercolour pens. These are brush pens, and I love these. These are my favourite for colouring. Just picking out the colours I'm going to use. For the body, I'm using a light grey. I'm just going to highlight the sort of snow areas of the body of the snowman. And then I've got a pink for the scarf and an orange for the carrot nose. I'm going to zoom in for you. There you go, so you can see what I'm doing when I'm colouring. This, as I said, is a heavy watercolour cardstock. I think it's a 300 GSM, which is £140. So it's quite a heavy paper and can take quite a lot of water, which is good. So I just dot some colour around the edge, and I'm using my water brush just to pull that in. You can see, and unfortunately it does go out of focus while I'm doing that because you've got obviously the length of the pen it's trying to focus on, but you can see I'm kind of just going over the areas where I've laid down the colour, awakening the pigment, and then kind of dragging it across the page, and that's how we end up with our nice sort of darker edges and lighter middle basically. And it literally takes a few seconds to colour. It's really not a long job, and you can go as deep as you want. I kind of left it fairly fairly easy. And I used my my cloth there just to dab off any of the colour in the middle, so that I had a distinct, darker edge. I coloured the carrot nose, and then just went over that with my water brush, just to give it a bit of texture, and then similarly did the pink scarf. I thought a nice vibrant pink. I could have done an obvious blue, but I thought, no, pink, let's go for something a little bit different. So I'm just dabbing some colour on there, and then just pulling that out with the water brush. There we go, and that's coloured. I mean, that literally took 3 or 4 minutes. I mean, it really didn't take long at all. And that's the main focal point of the card. Now, it actually looks quite nice like that. I could have left it as a clean and simple card like that and just added a sentiment. I quite like that look, but I decided I was going to use this geometric stencil. This is a new stencil. I haven't used it before. It was in my stash, and I pulled it out when I pulled that stamp out, thinking, yeah, they could go quite well together. So anyway, I'm going to use some tape and actually stick it down. Now, because the stamp, or the central image, is smaller than the stencil, I actually decided to stick the thing to the stencil instead, which is the other way around, because usually you'd stick your piece of paper that you're working on to the desk and then stick the stencil on top. But because they're the other way around, I thought, oh well, I'll do it backwards. So I just made sure it was lined up geometrically and then just stuck it down. Basically, it's a pain and it takes time to do, but it always makes a difference. So I'm using a stencil brush. This is a Lavinia one, and I've got my broken china. So I'm using a piece of paper. Always good to put the ink on your brush and then just take it off on the paper. That way, make sure you don't have any really heavy load of ink on the brush, so that you then make a mess, and you can always add. It's much more difficult to take away. So I started off quite bold, and then I'm just working my way around. So I'm starting heavier on the outside and then just lightening it as it goes inside, so that I end up with quite a nice sort of fade out from the central image. This will help make the stamped image the focal point of the card. So even though you've got stuff going on in the background, it still makes the stamped image the real focal point, which is good. So I'm just working my way all around, and notice I turned the whole thing around because I stamped the image to the back of the stencil. It's very easy to flip the whole thing around. You wouldn't be able to do that if you'd stuck it all down on the desk. It means if you're right-handed, you can continue to work with your right hand. So then it's just a case of peeling that off and taking that central panel out. There we go, and that's what it looks like. So we've now got quite an interesting kind of framework around. I did slightly darker bottom right because that's where I'm going to put the sentiment. So I thought, well, I'm going to lift that up anyway. So that's why I kind of went slightly heavier there, bottom right. But that was where I started, where most of the ink is going to be on the brush, and that's kind of the heaviest part to start with. So I then went to find my sentiment. So I decided to use this one. And I just got a scrap piece of the same card. Again, I'm just going to stamp it with an acrylic block. I used a blue ink. This is a Versafine blue, and you can see I just did it by eye, basically. The best Christmas is a white one. There we go. And then similarly, I'm going to just put that into my Wow Clear Emboss and heat set it so that it's in gloss and it's darkened and it matches the other stamped image. Just heating that quickly with my heat tool, and then I'll cut that down and I'll mount it on some matching cardstock, just so we've got a nice like frame sentiment. So it's just a case now of cutting that down really. So I just used the grid on my cutting board. You can see there, not particularly scientific, but good enough. So just cutting that down with my stencil basically. Annoyingly, this cutting board, they're not centimeters, which is what I'm used to, but I bought a new one and didn't realize it's not actual centimeters, which is a little bit annoying. So I'm just using any kind of line there just to make sure I've got it square. There we go. So there's our sentiment, and then I just found from a scraps pile a piece of sort of mid blue metallic sort of pearlescent paper. So I'm just going to use some glue in my pin top bottle just to stick that down, and then I'll cut that out as well. I tend to use my tweezers a lot because I'm a man and we tend to be ham-fisted, not quite as delicate as you ladies out there. So I do use my tweezers quite a lot for picking things up, and then I'm just going to cut that down as well. I always keep my scraps because invariably they come in useful. And you can see I'm doing all of that by eye. It's you know, you can spend ages measuring, but it's near enough. So I placed that down. What was missing for me, I needed something horizontally across the page. So I went and found in my Christmas tape washi box, I'd got a whole load of different washi tape. So I found one in a blue that would kind of match. I've just lined it up with something vertically across the page, so horizontally, sorry, and then just stuck that down. I'm just double checking that it's square, because the geometric pattern looked like it was going to put it in the right place, but you never quite know. So I did just take a second and measure it. And then I got some foam pads out just to lift the sentiment up slightly so it sits just above the foam tape and above the base of the card, just for a little bit of added interest. So I'm just going to peel those off and then stick the sentiment down, and then we're pretty much done. Don't you just love foam pads? There we go, and then it's literally just a case of placing it. Now you see how offset I've done everything on this card. The sentiment is offset bottom right, the image is offset top left. So by doing that, I've kind of made your focal point the middle of the card, but by looking at two different things, neither of which are centered. It's quite a nice trick in card making. Kind of trick the eye, put something left, put something right, and it makes you look in the middle. There we go. So I laid that down on my card blank, but I just decided the white edge was a little bit severe against the white. So I thought I'll just take that same blue, just use my sponge there, just to kind of go around the edges and just darken those edges slightly, just so I'd got a line between. I didn't want to put another layer underneath, which I could have done, but I didn't have that same blue matching paper to hand. So I thought, no, I'm just going to darken the edge slightly with some ink, which is what I did. And then it's a case of taping up, so double-sided tape, just to stick the whole thing down, basically. I do usually put a layer in between, but on this one I decided not to. And I'm doing bunny ears because I'm going straight onto the actual card blank. I always do that with the last layer. Just allows you a little bit of wiggle and allows you to get it in the right place. There we go, so I'm just making sure that's even, top, bottom, left, right. And then I'll press that down and literally just pull the tapes off. And that's quite a modern Christmas card, but with some sort of traditional imagery as part of it. That'll do for a friend. I quite like the look of it, I'm quite pleased with that. So, and that stamp was, I think it was a freebie from a magazine set, potentially. I decided to just add a few little gems, so I found a tiny little blue gem, and I just added 3 of those just around the image, just to add a tiny little bit more interest. I always press them down with the end of my tweezers just to make sure they're absolutely stuck. And here we go, so I just found 3 little holes for them and stuck them down. And there's today's card. So funky geometric pattern, coloured central sort of traditional snowman image, and a nice modern sentiment. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Thank you.